And we are live. G'day everyone, Mike Jeffrey here, and you are listening to My Creative Journey, episode number 26. To all you new listeners out there, hello, and thank you so much for taking the time to stop by here today. As I said, my name is Mike, and I'm a wedding photographer from Sydney, Australia. Each week on the show, I bring you guys along on the highs and lows of my own creative journey, and share all the knowledge that I've gained along the road to building my own freelance business. This week's episode is a continuation of last week's episode. This was actually a two-part episode, so if you haven't listened to episode 25 yet, I do recommend you go back and have a listen to that one. But this one is going to be speaking all about the importance of self-care. Last week we spoke about the importance of having breaks, and this week we're going to be talking about the importance of having self-care in instances where you can't take breaks. So I have my wonderful fiancée Emily here with me, and we're going to be talking about some of the things that you can do in order to look after yourself when you aren't able to have those breaks. And so I'm going to throw straight over to you, Emily, and we're going to be talking a bit about a couple of things that you would do in instances where you can't take breaks. So, for example, you're in a job, you're working, and you can't actually have any time away. You haven't got any scheduled time off. And so we're talking about some of the things you can do in the afternoons, in the evenings, if you have half an hour here and there. What are some of the things that you would recommend trying to do to sort of be able to calm yourself, take yourself out of that work environment and sort of bring yourself back down a little bit and really think about some of the things that are important to you?
Hey, thanks for having me again. I guess just quickly before I answer the question, if you didn't listen to last week, I did give a little brief background on who I am and why I'm talking about this. So I'm a uni student. I just completed a 500-hour or 16-week placement, and along with that, I balance work and life and all that jazz. But yeah, I'm obviously no expert, but in terms of what I do in the afternoons and weekends, it really depends on, what I'm feeling, but a whole range of stuff. And one thing I was told by my supervisor while I was on placement, and something that has really stuck with me, is that our self-care is like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't know what that is, at the base of hierarchy is, food, shelter, those immediate things like you need to live, and then at the higher end is self-actualization. And so in terms of self-care, I think, relating that back is that we all have different levels of self-care. So at the base, it might be like, eating good food and, moving your body and blah, blah, blah. And they're things that we do to kind of get by. But at the top is what we can do that actually rejuvenates us and really is proper self-care. So in terms of like when I was doing placement or someone who has a full-time job, I think, it's much harder to do those really big activities that are self-care, and you're often limited to afternoon, evenings and weekends. And for me, it looked like watching a lot of TV, having some quiet time where I actually just did nothing. I just kind of looked out a window, laid on the bed, or going for walks and exploring new places. So whether that, like for me, and I know it's really, lockdown, you can't do this at the moment, but when we weren't in lockdown, trying a new cafe, trying a new restaurant. So it doesn't have to be exploring big things. It can be exploring things within your local area as well.
And I think, I'd just add into there, I like to exercise, and so that's one of the big things that I do if I have a spare half an hour. And I think it's been one of the things that has been talked about a lot with people being in isolation, people being in lockdown, is being able to go out and exercise. And you're obviously allowed out for an hour of exercise every day, and you're allowed to go and do that exercise. And a lot of people have been talking about it on social media as it being something that they're able to exercise because now they're in lockdown. They have time to go and exercise, and people sort of make it out to be something that just because now they're in lockdown, now they're all of a sudden becoming more fit than they were when they weren't in lockdown, because now they've got the time. But I think that should be reason enough to be able to prioritize it more often. Especially for me, I know that for my own mental health, being able to go out and exercise and be able to get the fresh air and be able to get the blood pumping through exercise is a great way to be able to control my thoughts and control things in my own life and my own your mental well-being, but also my own physical well-being, and being able to take that time. Well, whether that be 15 minutes, I go for a walk when I'm having my lunch, or I go for an hour and go for a run of an afternoon. So taking time to exercise has always been one of those things for me. And I think has been one of the things that has started to get me into a slump. When I'm not exercising, I will tend to be able to feel myself going into that slump, and I know that I need to get back out there, whether that be just keep going for a 10-minute walk in the morning, to be able to get some oxygen and be able to get some light and actually leave the house to be able to get those sorts of things.
Yeah. And I think we all know that exercise and physical activity is really good for your mental health. But touching on that, as someone who isn't into running or anything as much, a way that I kind of implement it in my life is I really have to force myself to do it. There is a reason why exercising is good for your mental health is in so many, psychological pieces of literature as being beneficial. Sometimes we have to just trust that, the 10, 15-minute walk, it's going to feel so dreadful to get up and do it. But once we do it, we're going to feel 100% better. But something I do, if I'm really not feeling like I can get out of the house and do a 30-minute walk, is little things like go and slowly walk to the mailbox and get your mail, because that, for most people, that's outside, so it'll get you outside. Or if you have a balcony or a backyard, stretching your muscles, or even just going in, at the very least, having your coffee or tea or whatever you drink or eat outside. It's great to do physical activity, but if you're someone like me who's not overly ambitious when it comes to physical activity, you need to find ways to implement it, or try to find ways to implement it in your life in a much smaller and more achievable way. I've seen so many people going for runs since lockdown. I'm not ever going to be that person, but I will be that person who might take my dog around the block.
I just want to emphasize there that, just because I like to go for a run doesn't mean that everyone needs to go for a run for their exercise per day. I heard on a podcast once, I think someone said, if you don't like going for a run, you don't have to go for a run. There are multiple ways to exercise. You don't need to be able to go out and go for a run. You don't need to go ride a bike. If you don't own a bike, you don't need to go buy a bike. You can go and do multiple other things. There are different types of exercise for everyone, and whether that be you really enjoy going for a swim, you enjoy being at the gym, you enjoy going for a walk, you enjoy dancing around your lounge room. It doesn't matter. There are different types of exercise for everyone out there, and I think being able to get that exercise is the most important thing, regardless of what style of exercise that may be. I wanted to touch on the next point, really, was about some of the things about being very self-reflective. And one of the things that I've noticed is being able to take time for myself and to be able to take time in my own thoughts. I know a lot of friends that I have like to be able to write their own journal and be able to, and like to sit down at the end of the night and actually write down some of their thoughts and write down some of the things that they've been thinking about through the day, because it's a good way to get them out onto the page and not have to remember them and not have them take up mental space for the next day. And whether that be you like to actually write them down, or whether that be you just like to take 10, 15 minutes to actually think about some of the things and think about those things and put them away and really be able to put those ideas to bed. So are there things that you do in your own life where they could be that sort of self-reflective type of thing that's not necessarily exercise, but it can be something else that you're actively planning to take time to do those sorts of things?
Yeah, self-reflection has been really important for me, both personally as a person who has the challenges of mental health, but also someone who works in a profession that is ethically and politically based. So for me, it doesn't look like writing it down. I actually find it really intimidating to write things down, because I find if it's on a page, it's a lot more real. Doesn't mean I don't think about it, but for me, I don't like storing that in a hard copy form. So what I tend to do is, that's why I have been trying to be more bored recently, especially trying to end my phone time at 9:30, and then that's just time that is free of, whatever. And that means that I can see where thoughts are coming from and really analyze them, I guess, and be reflective of them. And I think that helps me have mental clarity and helps me understand more of where anxiety, stress, tension, and even where my values sit as well. So mine's not necessarily hard copy forms of anything. It's just allowing time to just sit there and reflect.
Mm-hmm. And you have often spoken about being in a profession where the things that you talk about in the profession are often things that are dragged out into your own home life and your own in your own life with other people. As you work in a profession where things are often spoken about through friends and family are things that are easily related to. I know for me personally, not many people come up and ask me about photography. Not many people talk about photography in their day-to-day life. So as I leave the job, no one is often bringing up things that I've talked about through the day or I've spent the day working on. But for you, you often can be in scenarios where people will bring up things that you've actively done at work, whether that be they're interested in the things that you do at work, or that be something that is on the news that has happened and had an impact to things that you've been learning about or working on at work yourself. So how do you suggest someone would take time away when some of the things they may enjoy doing, whether that be going and just watching TV at night, may be interrupted by those sorts of things, or maybe they like to hang out with their friends, but sometimes that can become interrupted with things around their work. How do you go about confronting those sorts of things?
It's really, really hard. And it's something that if you asked me January last year, I probably thought I had my head around, but I actually sucked at. And that has probably come up because last year was really, I probably got a bit burnt out in terms of, there was coronavirus and there was a lot of political tensions and a lot of things, circulating on social media and within the news cycle. But I guess as someone who's a little bit more practiced now, not overly, for me, I've had to untangle my identity being so closely associated with my profession. I think a lot of my identity came from, being this humanitarian and being an activist and being, so involved in a lot of different political, moral and ethical fronts. And so it was having to break away from that as my identity. And I think that's important for all of us, is that just our profession doesn't dictate our personality and it doesn't dictate what we like to do or be all the time. So for me now, when, friends or family bring up something that's really closely related to what I'm working in or studying in, is not responding in a way that my professional self would. So I could offer advice, like if someone said, hey, I can't afford housing, and I was like, hey, these are affordable housing options, that would be taking a professional stance. Whereas now I try and take the stance of like, people just want to be heard usually. So being like, yeah, that's really tough. And that for me really helped break or separate work and my life, is taking a step, untangling myself within that as my sole identity. And that meant finding other activities and finding other things I was passionate about and like to do that wasn't solely involved in that. And I guess, I don't know how that fits in with photography, but I can imagine it's trying to separate that as well. You don't always have to give professional photography advice on every picture.
I think I definitely come at that from a perspective where I don't get people asking me about photography very often, and it's not something that's often in the news, so people don't talk about it as much. And if they do ask, it's more from an interest perspective, and I'm always open and happy to answer those sorts of questions. And it's not often about the things that are actively stressing me in my work environment. They're not often about those types of things. But I wanted to touch on a couple of points that you raised there. The first of which was in that sort of news cycle. I know a lot of people at the moment around the whole coronavirus thing, it can become like a lot of information I have to deal with, especially when that seems to be what's taking over all news and seems to be taking over our social media at the moment, is sort of all the news about that and circulating and different things and different theories of all that types of stuff. So for me as a person, I know that I don't particularly enjoy that, and I don't enjoy talking about that. I don't enjoy when I catch up with people talking about those sorts of things, and I try to remove myself as much from that as possible. And one of the ways that I do that, and I know you do that as well, is not being able to you watch the news as much, because that is all that seems to be talked about at the moment. So I think that is certainly important in what you were saying, was to not be able to give into that as much, and not playing into being an expert in any field. I think too many people try and take up the mantle of expert in different fields that they're not overly expert in, and trying to take a step back and just listen to what people have to say, but you don't have to respond over the top as well. You don't need to sort of give into that conversation if that is something that is actively causing you stress. Taking a step back and just hearing what they have to say, but don't respond in a way that is going to continue the conversation, I guess, and continue talking about things that you don't enjoy.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that's more of an intrinsic thing for a lot of people. Like for me, most people probably, when they talk about these things, do not want a social work perspective at all. And I think it was my pressure, and probably for a lot of other people being like, oh, I'm in this field, like I have to have an opinion. No, you don't. Like you're also human, and that can end at 5 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on was something you brought up about actually finding other things you're interested in and finding other hobbies. And I know that we've spoken about this before, and something that you felt you didn't have outside of a career was any other hobbies. And I know I've felt that as well. And being someone who works in something that I was actively using as a hobby, as photography, being something that I had as a hobby that I then turned into a business, do I now then go back and think, do I need an extra hobby? Do I need something else that I can use as a hobby on the side? And for me, and that's been something for me with sort of my landscape photography, that I've liked to use that as sort of a hobby. I don't put too much pressure on myself for landscape photography. It's not something that I actively pursue as a business. So that is something that I can do on the weekends that I enjoy. And if that is half an hour of an evening that I get to do that, I will take that time because I know that I really enjoy that. And it has been through the time that we've taken away, I've realized that I really do enjoy that as a hobby, and I've enjoyed that a lot more than I knew I did enjoy it. It was something that I sort of neglected, and we spoke about it at length, I think, before we went away, and you sort of asked how much of the things that you're trying to do are you trying to do for yourself, and are you doing them because you enjoy them? Are you giving yourself time to do the things you enjoy? And I think that's important for a lot of people. Too many people work too hard and don't give themselves time to do things they enjoy, and too many people sort of think that they're not allowed to give themselves time to do things they enjoy, and feel too bad because they are trying to do things they enjoy, and feel bad for trying to do things that they may enjoy, if that is a bad thing to do, or if it is seen in society as a bad thing to do. So what are some of the things that you've sort of come up with, and some of the things that you consider now your hobbies, or some of the things that you like to do but may have not considered as options to do, or things that you should have been dedicating time to beforehand?
I guess things like focusing more on community and how to build a community around me. Also, reading or cooking, but basically anything I enjoyed. Like I didn't have to be perfect at it. Like if I feel on a whim that I want to go painting, I'll go do painting, because I think we get in this like loop of, because of social media or whatever it might be, that we think if we do something, we have to do it all the way. There's not a lot of like starting at the bottom, working up. Like I might do painting and I might just do it for the pure love of it. I might never do it to make an Instagram account about it, or, baking in the same respect. So I think for me, it's just literally anything that brings me any kind of joy, and knowing that I don't have to be a perfectionist. And I often battle with the whole idea of, can I give myself space to do it? And I think that comes down to like, and maybe many other people can find myself being very susceptible to the hustle culture that surrounds a lot of Instagram, and being like, oh, I can't give myself time because that means I wouldn't be busy. And reality is, busy doesn't mean you have to be working all the time. It just, you can have that downtime and away time, and if anything, it's probably going to make you better for it.
And as we talk about sort of downtime, you brought up an interesting thing about social media there, and that's something that I did want to touch on with social media, and how we can use that to our advantage, and how we can actually use it in our downtime. And I know for you like being on social media. I like being on social media. I'm on social media quite a lot, and using that in my downtime, it's actually something that I really enjoy to do. I know a lot of people talk about it as being a bad thing, and being on social media is a bad thing, but I quite enjoy interacting with other people on social media, and I enjoy using it in that way where I can actually talk to people and use it to actually gain experiences from other people, and gain things from other people that I may not have known before, and learn things on there, and all sorts of things throughout your multitude of social media apps that there are out there today. So I wanted to touch on how we can use social media in our downtime, and is that okay to use social media, or should we be taking more breaks, do you think, from social media? Is that a case where if you have half an hour, should we be spending that on social media to try and remove ourselves from our own reality? Or is that something where maybe we shouldn't be spending that all in social media. We should be trying to actually make a genuine connection with someone else, or spending it with ourselves.
I mean, it's always up to the individual, but I think when we use social media, I personally think that you need to be really reflective in your use of social media, for me anyways, because sometimes I get to a point where social media is good, and then all of a sudden there's this tipping point of now I'm comparing myself, or now I'm, looking at other people's happiness and comparing that to mine. And I think that's where the danger lies, is that I have been trying to be more thoughtful in my use of social media. So if I'm on there and I'm enjoying it, that's great. I'm happy to use it in the 30 minutes, an hour, whatever, however long you use it. But if I all of a sudden feel a bit insecure about my body, and I reflect on that and think, oh, it's because I saw this person posting a bikini and they looked better than me, then I know that use of social media was too much. So I'm not against social media, but I am definitely trying to be much more thoughtful and purposeful in my use of social media, because I think even if it's not consciously affecting us, it subconsciously affects us. And that's why, again, touching on the point of being self-reflective is really important, because, we've got to recognize when it's becoming too much.
Yeah, and understanding why it is you're on social media. Yeah. Are you on there to try and portray yourself in a way that you aren't able to uphold in real life? Or are you on there to interact with other people? Are you on there to try and gain connection with other people? Being in isolation or being in lockdown, I think social media has become an excellent tool to be able to stay connected with other people. And it's been able to connect people not just in your own community, in your own circle, but to people all across the world, and people who have the same experiences as you, and people who you can genuinely relate to. I've often said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and a lot of people come back at that and say, well, how do I spend time with people who are just like me, and how do I spend time with people who are like myself when I'm trying to build something, and how do I use that and use the people around me to support me up? And I think one of the big ways that we can do that is being on social media and using people that we have on social media and interacting with people. They don't just need to be an empty screen on social media. You can actually reach out to people nowadays and talk to them and ask questions of them, and use them as people you're surrounding yourself with, and talking to people in community is a great way to actually use the app, I think.
Yeah, and I think, again, as you kind of touched on, like, why you're using social media, and one thing that, and maybe this might help others, but I guess one thing I've been trying to do is focus more on the memory and less on the aesthetic of a picture. And I know that differs, because I'm talking to someone who has, and other people who may have a business on that. So obviously it's not quite the same. But for me, as an individual using Instagram, for example, if I can focus more on the memory that I'm trying to show other people than the way I look, that to me is breaking that status quo and helping me be more reflective.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's an important thing for anyone out there who is on any social media app. If we can use it to be something that where we're trying to use it to get the best out of it for us, rather than trying to curate something that isn't real. I think that is the best way. And to be trying to be genuinely yourself is always the best way to go about anything. And I think that will bring you the most happiness in the end. Now, to round out this episode, I wanted to quickly throw out one last question and ask about what we were talking about earlier, and throw it back to if you had like 10, 15 minutes to do something in a bit of downtime, what would those things be to do to sort of reduce stress? What would you suggest people do if they have 10, 15 minutes in the evening that they can use by themselves? What would be your top 3 things that you would suggest to do?
Try and be mindful, whether that's like through breathing. As much as that's going to sound like a broken record, it does work. We have to trust the professionals on that one. So push through the barrier of feeling awkward about it. Do something, for me, do something mindless, whether that's mindlessly watching a trashy reality TV show or something like that. And also for me is playing with my dog, or our dog. Playing with our dog.
Our dog. That's interesting, the one you brought up about actually breathing. I was listening to an episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast this morning, actually, with he had a guest on, Andrew Huberman, who was talking about breathing and talking about different breathing exercises. He brought up one of his exercises that he's been trying to teach other people, and he said it's been very effective for him in actually reducing stress. He said if you breathe in and then breathe in again and then breathe out, that's the best way to release the actual carbon dioxide in the blood, which is what actually builds up and causes us stress and causes us that anxiety. So he said breathe in and then breathe in again on top of that, and then breathe out. And if you can do that through your nose, primarily will help increase oxygen intake and then carbon dioxide outtake. And that has been one of the ways that's been proven to be able to reduce stress in the fastest amount of time. And he said if you only have a minute to reduce your stress, that will be the best way to do it. And obviously we know about breathing, but I thought that was a really interesting point. So if you do take anything away from this episode, it can be from that. And if you have heard Tim Ferriss's episode on that, I do highly recommend that one as well. But I would say exercise as well. If you can get any exercise in, I think anything is better than nothing at all. I think just being outside, if you've only got 5-10 minutes, just walk outside and spend that time outside rather than indoors. I always think, especially if it's in the morning, if you've got 5 minutes before you go to work in the morning, spend it outside and spend it opening your airways and trying to breathe and trying to get oxygen and trying to get some sunlight in as well. And if you can exercise, if you can go for a 5-10 minute walk, I think that's a lot better than not doing anything at all. But primarily for me, I like to spend it by myself. I like to spend that time very reflective. I like to spend it not overstimulating myself. I think that's one of the biggest things, and one of the biggest takeaways for me is not overstimulating myself in environments where I'm already stressed out. I don't want to be providing too much stimulus and too many things to think about. If we can become super structured on those sorts of things and not give yourself too many decisions to make and try to plan everything in your day, sort of be able to take that time to really think about the things that has been worrying you and really take time to sort of think about what it is you can do next. So I hope you guys have really enjoyed this episode. If you have, I would really appreciate it if you did share this episode around. I know I ask for that every single week, but this one will be no different. I've been having a lot of great messages from a lot of different people. So it's been really nice to hear from you guys, and great to hear that you're actually appreciating these episodes. So if you have been really enjoying them, I would really love it if you did share that around. But also, I'd love to thank Emily for coming on this episode, but also last episode as well, if you did hear that one as well. And I think added a lot of valuable points to the episode that come from a different perspective than I would be able to provide. So I was really happy to have her on, but also very happy to actually have a guest on this podcast. And it's been something that I've been trying to do for a long time. So hopefully we can start a trend on that and continue that going forward. But did you have any last thoughts, Emily, before we close out this episode?
No, just take care of yourself, Sydney, and thanks for having me.
No worries at all. And until next week, guys, have a great week, and I will speak to you all again next Monday. Bye.